When I opened the envelope, I thought it was junk mail until I saw my parents were suing me for $350,000 for raising me. Hi, I'm Natalie. I've always been the dependable one, the one who never asked for anything, but when my parents decided I should pay for my sister's mortgage, after already covering her divorce and rent, I said no. What happened next? They turned the whole family against me, dragged me into court, and tried to make me the villain. But here's the twist. They didn't know what I had kept all along. Have you ever been expected to fix someone else's mess just because you're the responsible one? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. When my mom called it great family news, I should have known it wasn't about me. She always saved that phrase for announcements involving Rachel, a new job, a baby on the way, even when Rachel finally kicked out her philandering ex-husband. Great news, Mom had said, as if emotional devastation were some kind of fresh start. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I'd just come home from work and was still in my scrubs when the phone rang. I nearly let it go to voicemail. But something in me, old habits I guess, still picked up when I saw Mom on the screen. "Hi, Natalie," she said, voice chipper. "Any plans tonight?" "Dinner and sleep," I said, kicking off my shoes. "Why?" "We have some wonderful family news," she said. "Can you come by the house?" I hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "Oh yes," she said quickly. "Even better than okay. Come for dinner. Your father and I already told Rachel, and she'll be there too." That should have been my cue to run the other way, but guilt is tricky like that. It wraps around your ribs and tightens until you can't say no without feeling like the villain. So I went. Their house hadn't changed. Same manicured lawn, same holiday wreath that looked more catalog than handmade. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and ham filled the air, but the warmth felt staged. Dad was setting the table. Mom greeted me with air kisses and a tight-lipped smile. Rachel wasn't there yet, or maybe she'd already left. "Sit," Mom said, guiding me toward the dining room. The table was set for 4, but only 3 plates had food. The 4th, presumably Rachel's, sat empty. Dad placed a folder next to my napkin and gave my shoulder a pat, like he was congratulating me for something I hadn't done yet. "What's going on?" I asked. "Open it," he said, beaming. Inside were printed documents, legal text, address lines, and a bold header that read, "Mortgage Agreement." My stomach sank. Mom clasped her hands together. "It's for Rachel's new house," she said. "We used some of our retirement to help with the down payment. It's a lovely little place with a backyard for the boys." "That's good," I said slowly. I didn't realize she was looking. "She wasn't, really," Dad said. "But when we found this place, we knew it was perfect." I nodded and tried to hand the folder back. Mom didn't take it. "They're for you now," she said. "You'll be making the payments." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Dad cleared his throat. "We all discussed it. Rachel's situation is difficult right now, and you're in a good place financially. We thought this was the best way to support the family." I stared at them. "You bought a house in Rachel's name and now expect me to pay the mortgage?" Mom looked at me with that serene expression she wore whenever she thought she was being reasonable. "You've always been the independent one. You've been saving for years, and you don't have kids or a husband to support. It just makes sense." I couldn't believe it. "Did Rachel agree to this?" "She knows it's best for the boys," Dad said. "They need stability." "She needs stability," I shot back. "I already paid her lawyer during the divorce. I covered 6 months of rent. That was supposed to be temporary." Mom placed a hand on mine. Her skin was cold, her grip firm. "Family supports each other," she said softly. "You're strong, Natalie. You've always been the one we could count on." Growing up, that's exactly what she used to say. "Rachel just needs more help. You'll figure it out." I heard it so often it became a mantra, the way she justified every sacrifice I made, every school trip skipped so Rachel could get a new dress, every birthday dinner shortened because Rachel had a meltdown. I looked around the room, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The ticking of the grandfather clock louder than usual, the untouched plate in front of Rachel's seat, the smell of ham turning bitter. I stood up. "I can't do this," I said. Mom's smile didn't fade. She simply nudged the folder back toward me. "It's already bought," she said, like she was offering me a favor. "You just need to handle the payments." I stared at her, at my father, who had the decency to look down, at the empty plate, at the future they were trying to shove into my lap. "I'm not Rachel's backup plan," I whispered. No one responded. I took the folder and placed it back on the table, carefully, like it might explode if handled wrong. Then I turned and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Mom called behind me. "Home," I said without turning back, "where I pay my own bills." The click of the door felt final, but something in my chest told me this was just the beginning. Apparently, my savings account had become a family asset, the kind no one needed to ask about, just access, like a communal resource quietly expected to serve everyone but me. I stood for a long moment after Mom nudged the folder back at me. The house smelled of nutmeg and leftover ambition. The apple pie sat in the center of the table, untouched, its glossy crust starting to dull under the soft glow of the chandelier. A pot of coffee sat beside it, untouched, steam long gone. No one spoke. Finally, Mom broke the silence, as if I'd merely dropped the ball in a conversation. "Natalie, sweetheart, we raised you for over 18 years. That kind of commitment doesn't disappear." I slowly sat back down, not to agree, but because my legs were starting to shake. "Are you seriously bringing up the cost of parenting right now?" She folded her napkin and placed it neatly beside her plate, an unnecessary gesture in a moment so raw. "Raising a child isn't free," she said. "It's only fair you help now that you're able." I looked at Rachel, seated across from me, avoiding eye contact. Her hands were folded in her lap, her shoulders curled inward like a child waiting for punishment. She hadn't touched the pie either. "You bought a house," I said, my voice low, "and assumed I'd pay for it." Dad leaned forward. "It's not about assuming. It's about recognizing what's possible. Rachel's going through a tough time. She has 2 children to think about. I don't," I interrupted. "I don't have kids. I don't have a husband. That doesn't mean my money's up for grabs." Mom gave a tight smile. "That's exactly why you're in a position to help." "Because I'm alone?" I asked. "Because I didn't give you grandchildren and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment?" Rachel spoke then, so softly I almost missed it. "The boys need a home." 4 words. That was all she could manage. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were rimmed with red but dry. Her lip trembled, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the sister I used to build blanket forts with, before the favoritism, before the split birthdays, before the days she learned she didn't have to ask, because Mom would ask for her. "You should have said something," I told her, "when they first mentioned this plan. You knew it was wrong." She didn't answer. Mom jumped in, smoothing the air like a wedding planner fixing a wilted flower arrangement. "We thought you'd step up. You always do. You're responsible. And Rachel's been through enough." I could feel it, rage rising like heat beneath my skin, my fingers curled against the armrest. Responsible doesn't mean gullible, and it definitely doesn't mean I owe anyone a house. Robert's tone turned practical. He was always the voice of reason in the house, which usually meant his voice followed Mom's decisions. "We know your salary," he said. "You've been working full-time for years. No children, no major expenses. We ran the numbers." "You what?" "I said," he continued calmly, "we ran the numbers. Between what you've saved and your current income, it's manageable. You'd still be able to buy your own place someday." My breath caught in my throat. "You ran my finances without me?" "We've always had your best interest at heart." I pushed my chair back with a screech. "You don't get to plan my life around Rachel's failures." Dad frowned. "That's not fair." "Fair," I laughed bitterly. "You bought her a house and handed me the bill, without asking, without even wondering if I had other plans for my savings." Mom's tone shifted then, the way it always did when she thought she was losing ground, warm, pleading, rehearsed. "We only did this because we believe in you. You're capable. Rachel needs support. I looked at Rachel again. She wasn't crying. She wasn't protesting either. She doesn't need support, I said. She needs accountability. You all do. Dad's voice was firm now. We bought it knowing you'd take care of it. You don't have a family. This is how you support yours. I went still. Not having a husband or children had always made me feel like an outlier in this family. Now they'd twisted it into justification, like I had less of a life, like my dreams, quiet ones maybe, but real, were disposable in service of theirs. The silence was heavy again, the kind that makes walls creak and clock hands louder. I reached for the folder slowly and placed it in the center of the table, right between the pie and the untouched coffee pot. I won't be paying for this house, I said. Mom's lips parted, ready to object. I said no, I added louder. I stood, my legs steadier now, my voice firm. I wasn't sure what strength looked like until it passed through me like that, like a storm that doesn't ask for permission. I've helped before. I've given and given. But this is theft dressed as family. Rachel looked up then, eyes wide and shimmering, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorry for her. As I walked to the door, I didn't look back. I didn't take the pie or the folder. I didn't wait for Mom's guilt-tripping goodbye or Dad's rational last word. I reached for the knob and pulled it open into the night. Just as it clicked behind me, I heard it. Rachel, crying. Not wailing, not begging, just soft, broken sobs. I didn't stop. Let someone else comfort her this time. The next person to call me wasn't my mother, it was my cousin Jenna, calling me selfish. It was a rainy Tuesday, early December. I'd just gotten home from work, coat still damp from the mist outside. My apartment felt unusually still. The only sound a quiet jazz station murmuring from the kitchen radio. I poured myself a cup of cocoa, set it on the counter, and let my body fold into the couch. That's when my phone buzzed. Jenna's name lit the screen. I hadn't talked to her in months, maybe a year. The kind of cousin who sends holiday photos of her kids but never texts on your birthday. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, Jenna. I can't believe what I'm hearing, she began, skipping any greeting. Rachel said you won't help with the house. My stomach clenched. That's right. She's your sister, Jenna continued, and those boys, your nephews, they need a home. Rachel would do it for you. I almost laughed. No, she wouldn't. Family helps family, Natalie, she snapped. You're acting cold. I've already helped Rachel, I said, keeping my voice as even as I could. I paid her rent. I covered her divorce attorney. But no one asked before buying a house and handing me the bill. She's struggling, Jenna said, and you're sitting on savings. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She hung up without saying goodbye. That set the tone for the rest of the week. Voicemails started trickling in, Uncle Mark's voice slow and gravelly, telling me I was too proud to remember my roots. A text from Aunt Emily, just one line. You're really not who I thought you were. By Thursday, my phone buzzed every few hours. Most I ignored. Some I listened to, then deleted. They all sounded the same. Think of the boys. She needs you. Family sticks together. I blocked 6 numbers before dinner, and then came the message I couldn't delete. Mom's voice, brittle and sharp. We gave you life. This is how you thank us? It was only 10 words, but it hung in the air like smoke. I listened to it 3 times before pressing delete. That night, I stood in front of the kitchen cabinet I rarely opened. Inside was a teacup, white with tiny lavender blossoms, cracked across the handle. I'd painted it at a summer camp when I was 12. Mom had stashed it away, saying it didn't match the rest of her china. I'd taken it with me when I moved out, a quiet act of defiance. Now I stared at it, through the glass. A small thing, forgotten and flawed, but still mine. By the weekend, I couldn't breathe in that apartment anymore. The walls felt too tight, the silence too judgmental. I needed something real, something older than guilt. So I drove to see my grandparents. They lived 40 minutes outside the city, in a modest bungalow with mismatched furniture and a bird feeder that always had visitors. My grandmother opened the door before I knocked, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and fabric softener. "Oh, honey," she said, rubbing my back, "we heard what's been going on." I stepped inside, setting my coat on the armrest. The fireplace crackled, and Grandpa looked up from his crossword, adjusting his glasses. "I don't even know where to start," I said. "Start with the truth," he replied. So I told them everything. The dinner, the folder, the calls, even the silence from Rachel, which somehow hurt the most. They listened, nodding occasionally, faces calm but deeply lined with worry. When I finished, Grandma shook her head. "That's not helping. That's manipulation." "And Rachel?" I asked. "Why won't she speak up?" "Because she's been coddled her whole life," Grandpa said. "And your parents. Well, they made that bed. They told me I should do this because I'm single," I said quietly. Grandma's eyes flashed. "You've built a life for yourself. That's something to be proud of." I felt my throat tighten. "You're not wrong to say no," she added. "Not everyone understands boundaries, but that doesn't make them less important." For the first time in days, I exhaled without shaking. We had lunch, chicken salad, soft rolls, lemon bars for dessert, and I let myself settle into the rhythm of their home, warmth without conditions, love without expectations. By the time I left, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but lighter somehow. I got home, set my keys on the counter, and saw the envelope. It had no return address, just my name. I opened it absently, expecting maybe a letter from work. Instead, I pulled out folded pages, dense text, official seals, and words that sent ice down my spine. Legal notification, civil action. I sat down. Slowly. It was a lawsuit, filed by my parents. They were suing me for $350,000, claiming it was repayment for raising me, food, clothing, medical bills, school supplies, even emotional labor during my college applications. I read it again and again. My hands shook as I placed the papers on the table. They were really doing this. Blood, it seemed, was just another ledger entry. My parents were suing me for back pay, for being their daughter. I held the certified letter in my lap, the edges creased from how many times I'd unfolded and refolded it. The legal jargon blurred together, but the number, $350,000, stood out in bold ink like it had been underlined by the universe itself. They wanted reimbursement for raising me, food, clothing, doctor visits, even an itemized mention of emotional support during college application season, as if I'd billed them hourly for stress and they were just now settling the tab. I stared at the living room wall in silence, cocoa growing cold on the coffee table. Outside, the sky hung low and colorless, February pressing its gray weight on everything. This couldn't be real. I called Grandma Eleanor with trembling hands. She picked up on the second ring. "Natalie?" "They're suing me," I said, voice breaking. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, and I could hear her footsteps as she walked into the kitchen. "I'll get Grandpa. We're coming tomorrow." "I need a lawyer," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "You need someone who fights fire with fire." By the end of the week, I was sitting in Monica Reyes's office, a clean, modern space with recessed lighting and a single abstract painting on the wall that looked like a storm swallowing a city. It suited the moment. Monica, sharp in a navy blazer, scanned the lawsuit without blinking. She had a calmness about her that steadied my breathing. Her voice was low, and even when she finally looked up, "They don't have a case," she said, "but that doesn't mean we won't take it seriously. We'll crush this." My jaw unclenched for the first time in days. "They're accusing me of owing them for childhood expenses," I said. "Is that even legal? In this country?" Monica leaned back. "It's legal to file just about anything. Winning is another story." I almost smiled. Almost. She handed me a yellow notepad. Start listing everything you've ever paid on their behalf. Bank transfers, receipts, even text messages offering help. Every scrap helps us tell your story. That night, I pulled open my desk drawer and found a weathered envelope of old receipts. I'd kept them out of habit, not sentimentality. Proof of transfers when they'd claimed the mortgage was late, or Rachel needed diapers, or their water heater had burst. 1,000 little emergencies, none of which had ever been mine. One by one, I laid them out on the dining table. Rent payments, attorney fees for Rachel's divorce, a $250 grocery gift card I mailed last Thanksgiving. Each piece of paper was a snapshot of the silence that had filled the spaces between us. When I finished, I found a photo tucked between old paperwork. It was from high school. Rachel beamed front and center, her hair curled, hands on her hips like a pageant queen. Behind her, blurry, almost out of frame, I stood holding a participation ribbon. I stared at that photo longer than I wanted to admit. The next day, Monica flipped through the pile I brought in, nodding as she highlighted line after line. "This," she said, tapping a statement showing 6 months of rent payments. "This is what they'll pretend doesn't exist." She kept going, laying out our approach. A response to the court, a timeline for depositions, what to expect on the hearing date. At one point, she looked up and smiled, not kindly, sharply. "You didn't just support yourself," she said. "You supported them. Let's go make that clear." There it was again. Someone believing me without needing me to justify or explain. I sat up a little straighter. By the time I got home that evening, the sky had shifted to deep blue. I stood by the window for a long time, watching the city breathe beneath 1,000 lit windows. Then I opened my calendar. The court date was set. They wanted a fight. I was ready to show them who I'd become. Walking into court felt like walking into my own family's funeral. The Wake County Courthouse loomed above me in cold, gray stone. I remember thinking the air conditioning was too strong, humming like an engine that wouldn't shut off. My heels echoed against the floor as I walked past the wooden benches, past the people waiting for their turn at justice, past all the strangers who had no idea this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was the end of something I'd spent 32 years trying to preserve. My grandparents were already inside, sitting in the second row. Grandpa gave me a nod, firm and silent. Grandma reached out and squeezed my hand as I passed. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we know who you are." Monica walked beside me, composed as ever. She wore the same navy suit she did at our first meeting, her briefcase tucked under one arm like a sword. My parents sat on the opposite side of the aisle. My father's expression was unreadable, but my mother looked ready to cry, though I couldn't tell if it was sadness or performance. Rachel sat behind them, her eyes darting toward mine for just a second before flicking away. The judge, a man in his early 60s named Ramsey, entered briskly. He didn't smile. He didn't have to. The silence in the courtroom fell thick and immediate. We began. The court clerk read the summary aloud. The plaintiffs, Diane and Robert Sanders, were seeking $350,000 in reimbursement from their daughter, Natalie Sanders, for upbringing, for emotional investment, for being their child. I didn't blink. Diane took the stand first. She looked small under the lights, like a woman who'd gotten lost in the role she wrote for herself. Her voice was soft but trembled with practiced conviction. "We raised Natalie," she said, hands folded in her lap. "We fed her, we provided for her, and now we are struggling while she lives comfortably. All we ask is a fair contribution." Monica didn't flinch. She let Diane speak until the tears came. Then, with a polite nod, she stood. "Mrs. Sanders," she began, voice smooth, "can you confirm whether you paid for Natalie's college tuition?" Diane paused. "Well, no," she said. My mother did." "Did you contribute financially in any way after Natalie turned 18? "We were focused on Rachel's wedding at the time," Diane replied. "There was a lot going on." "So Natalie received no financial support from you during adulthood?" "She was independent," Diane said quickly, as though that were a flaw. She made it clear she didn't need us. Monica lifted a folder and handed a copy to the judge. These documents show Miss Sanders sent over $22,000 to her parents over the last 8 years. Small transfers, rent assistance, even grocery gift cards. Would you like me to read each item aloud? Judge Ramsey flipped through the pages. That won't be necessary. My father took the stand next. His tone was colder, less emotional. We're not saying we didn't make mistakes, he offered, but family supports each other. Natalie has the means. Rachel doesn't. Did you discuss the mortgage plan with Natalie before buying the house? Monica asked. He hesitated. No, he said. We assumed she would help. Monica tilted her head. Because she always had? He didn't answer. Then came Rachel. She walked slowly, her blouse tucked too neatly, like she was trying hard to look respectable. When she sat, she kept her eyes down. She doesn't have kids, Rachel said simply. I do. It's only fair. Monica didn't respond right away. The silence stretched long enough for the words to echo. Then she stood. Fair isn't exploitation, she said quietly. Fair is asking, not expecting. Fair is not buying a house you can't afford and handing someone else the bill because their life doesn't mirror yours. Rachel stared straight ahead. Finally, I was called. I stood with my back straight, hands steady. Monica had prepared me, but nothing prepares you for testifying against your own blood. I never refused to help my family, I said, but there's a difference between generosity and being used. I paid for my sister's attorney. I paid for her rent. I supported my parents when they said they were behind on bills. I did it quietly. I never asked for thanks. I paused. But they didn't ask for help. They demanded it. And when I said no, they tried to ruin me for it. Judge Ramsey tapped his pen once, twice on the wooden bench before leaning forward. I've reviewed both the claims and the supporting evidence, he began, his voice calm but firm. This case is not only without merit, it is, frankly, shameful. He looked directly at my parents. Raising a child is a responsibility, not a loan. What I see here is not a daughter shirking duty. It is a pattern of entitlement, cloaked in the language of love. He turned to me. Miss Sanders, this court dismisses the case entirely. It took a full 10 seconds before I breathed again. I turned to Monica, who gave a slight, victorious smile. My grandparents both teared up, Grandma dabbing her eyes with a tissue she'd probably carried in her purse for 20 years. We stood to leave. As I passed the row where my family sat, Rachel leaned in close and hissed, "You ruined everything." I stopped. For a moment, I looked at her the way you might look at a painting you once thought beautiful, but now see as warped. "No," I said. "I just stopped playing along." I didn't wait for her reply. I walked out, sunlight pouring through the high windows, the sound of that humming air conditioner finally drowned out by something louder. Peace. When I signed the mortgage for my own house, I didn't cry. I smiled. It was a crisp morning in April 2022. The pen moved smoothly across the paper, and with it, years of resentment, guilt, and tangled obligation slid off my shoulders like an old coat I'd finally outgrown. I walked out of that notary office with keys in one hand and peace in the other. The house wasn't grand, just a modest 2-bedroom with a narrow driveway and a patch of garden in the back. But it was mine, in the way nothing else in my life had ever truly been. The walls were bare, waiting for color. The floors creaked in places, honest and unapologetic. I loved every inch of it. The first weekend, I painted the kitchen a warm almond cream and the bedroom a soft blue-gray that reminded me of early mornings. I planted rosemary and lavender outside the back door, fragrant, hardy things that didn't ask much, just steady care. My bookshelf finally had a permanent home, and I alphabetized my novels like it mattered. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the living room window, I opened my laptop to check some utilities and saw a new email from my mother. Subject: Family housing plan. The message was short, too short. Rachel and the boys would be better off with you. Let us know when they can move in. There was no greeting, no apology, just assumption. Still. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed exactly what I needed to say. Do not contact me again. This is harassment. I will report further communication. Consider this your last warning. I hovered for a second, then hit send. I blocked their emails the same way I had their numbers. And just like that, the door closed. Not slammed, not bolted, just sealed. Later that week, my grandparents arrived for a visit. Grandpa carried a store-bought pie he tried to pass off as homemade. Grandma brought tulips wrapped in brown paper and her usual gift, presents. They didn't ask questions. They didn't mention my parents. We sat on the back porch and talked about bird feeders, recipes, and how I should paint the fence before the summer heat came. That night, I curled up on my new couch with a cup of chamomile and watched the ceiling fan spin slow circles above me. No one else had a key. No one could walk in uninvited or leave behind emotional wreckage for me to sweep up. This space, this life, was built from the quiet strength I'd always had, even when it went unnoticed. The next morning, I found a stray cat asleep on the porch. Calico, thin but proud, with one torn ear and the stubborn posture of something that had survived more than it should have. I opened the screen door and set down a saucer of tuna. She looked at me like she'd allow the kindness, but only on her terms. Justice, I said aloud. That's your name. She stayed. As the weeks passed, I unpacked slowly. I didn't rush to fill the walls or the silence. I let them both breathe. I got to know the rhythm of my neighborhood, the mail carrier with a limp, the widow next door who always wore bright lipstick, the kid who skateboards past every evening with earbuds and a slice of defiance. One day, while sweeping the porch, I paused to sip coffee. The rosemary had begun to bloom. Justice was curled in a patch of sun, twitching in her sleep. For the first time, I whispered to no one. No one else has a key to my peace. And it was true. I hadn't earned this life through perfection or obedience or endless giving. I'd earned it by stopping, by choosing stillness over sacrifice. Sometimes losing a family means finding yourself, and I'm not lost anymore. There's a quiet kind of joy in choosing peace over permission. As I sat on that porch, coffee in hand, lavender swaying in the breeze, I realized I hadn't just bought a house. I'd built a boundary, one brick of courage at a time. Sometimes love asks us to give, but other times it dares us to walk away with grace. Families don't need to be perfect, but they do need to be fair, and love without respect is just control in disguise. If this story resonates with you, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect, share your thoughts, or simply pass it along to someone who needs to hear. You don't owe anyone your peace.